Hi guys, welcome to the very first podcast for ADHD Ireland, hosted by me, Lauren McBride, or Her Thoughts in Bright Colours on Instagram. I hope we're all well. Over the course of this podcast, we're going to discuss all aspects of ADHD in an honest way, as we have lived with ADHD our whole lives. Some of us were diagnosed sooner than later, and some of us aren't diagnosed formally at all. This gives a wide variety of experiences from all different perspectives. Please listen at your own discretion, as we are coming from a place of personal experiences. Some topics may be sensitive to listeners, so please be advised that our opinions and lives may not directly correlate with your experiences living with ADHD. During these podcasts, people living with ADHD or who have experience with ADHD in their familial, platonic or romantic relationships will be joining me over Zoom. Thank you to everyone who is and will be involved. We couldn't do it without you. I'm super excited to be hosting this podcast. Thank you to ADHD Ireland for giving me the opportunity to do something that I love. And with that, let's chat. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Let's Chat ADHD. Today I have on with me Owen Murray of UrHired.ie. Owen is a qualified career consultant. We're going to be talking today about job preparation and how that can be difficult for neurodivergent people. Owen works directly with those with ADHD and also with special regard to those suffering with anxiety when they start the job application and preparation process. ADHD in work can be a difficult feat, as we've discussed on some of the earlier episodes. Some of our volunteers have submitted a bunch of questions for you. We have a huge interest in hearing what you have to say today. Owen, do you want to say hi to the listeners and tell us a little bit about how you started your journey?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for having me on. First of all, congrats to you on a great podcast. I've listened to nearly every episode at this stage, so I find them really great, and well done to you, and congrats on your recent graduation as well. So a bit about me, I suppose. My background, Lauren, is I have 13 years experience in recruitment. I started my career in recruitment in London, where I was an agency recruiter for 5 years. And then I moved back to Ireland, where I worked in recruitment for Accenture. I then moved on to Facebook, then on to LinkedIn. Then after that, TikTok. You can notice the social media theme in my experience.
Yeah,
most recently a company called Poly, who are now part of Hewlett Packard. And I went out on my own to kind of created UrHired.ie back in April of this year. So I've been going 8 months now. And the idea of the business was to help any job seeker find a job, no matter what background they have, no matter what level they are, but also to support companies with their interview process and offer advice on building a good candidate experience and an entire and structure a good interview process to so that they can secure the best talent. As you said and mentioned, the business caters for anyone diagnosed with ADHD or any level of anxiety. It's very close to my heart. So I suffer from anxiety myself. I find great satisfaction in supporting anyone with ADHD or any level of anxiety find work, because I know it's not easy. I've interviewed myself, over my career, and I still get nervous in interviews. Yes, that's really a bit about me and the business. And I'm have been entered into this world of entrepreneurs over the last 8 months. I get supported by the local enterprise office, who have supported me with a mentor as well. So that's a sort of a whistle-stop tour of everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Can I ask, did you have a lot of bad interview experiences before you kind of went into this line of work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we all have had bad experiences in interviews. I suppose my advice to my clients is it's how you learn from those experiences, and actually look at it as a stepping stone towards securing a job. And that's why I always emphasize to anyone looking for work and interviewing that if you are a no, which will happen, to make sure you get the positive feedback, but also the constructive feedback, because the constructive feedback is the feedback you need to focus on and to better yourself in your next interview. So if you can take something from that interview and learn something from it, that's a positive thing. So I think, as I said, everyone has had bad experiences, but yeah, I've learned from those experiences, and that's how I secured those roles essentially at the companies I worked with.
I was going to say as well, you're working with companies at the moment, you mentioned, as well as people preparing for their jobs. Have you recommended to any companies that they should be giving constructive feedback? Because personally, when I was doing my own job interviews from kind of age 17 until now, I often didn't get any form of feedback. I just would get an email for a no or a call for a yes.
Yeah, every company should give feedback to every candidate that interviews. And what I mean by that is, if someone applying for a job gets rejected by email, when they've applied, that's fine. I don't think there's enough time in the day to go back to every candidate and describe why they're not going to interview you. But if you have taken the time yourself to go for interview, interviews are not easy things to prepare for. You do a lot of research. You should, the least they can do, a company should do, is give you constructive feedback. If you've taken the time to actually meet them. I meet so many candidates that, are what they say ghosted during an interview process, which means they interview and they never hear any feedback. And, which creates a really bad candidate experience from the company's point of view. And that will come back to bite the company, because the candidate may have, more experience in a few years' time. And when that company reaches out to that candidate and they've created a bad candidate experience, that candidate probably won't interview again, in a new process. So throughout my career, I dealt with, hundreds of different hiring managers. And my advice to all the recruiters that I worked with as well was, make sure you get back to the candidates that were a no, because we could use those candidates again in a year's time if we're recruiting again. It also creates, a good brand for the company as well. And, word of mouth, especially in a place like Ireland, word gets around, and if you create a good candidate experience, only good things can happen for that business. So worst thing in the world when you get ghosted, Lauren. It's happened to me a few times, but that I've taken note of those companies and I've never applied to them again.
I think that's definitely the right thing to do. And as you were mentioning before, with people with anxiety or ADHD, the rejection sensitivity that comes with that might make it, extremely difficult to actually go back to the preparation for jobs and go back to any other company for an interview. Have you had a lot of people that would have had massive gaps in their job applications because of things like being rejected without being given feedback?
Do you mean gaps in their career, is it?
Yeah, gaps in their career or gaps from applying at all.
Yeah, I think so gaps in your career, they happen, right? And I suppose you just need to be, you need to over communicate. If you're in a job interview process and you're discussing any, gap in your career, you need to be proactive about addressing it. Why that gap happened, and what you've learned from that. And I always say to anyone that I'm giving advice on their CV is to highlight the reason why the gap is there on their CV. And the reason why I say that is because, when a recruiter is assessing your CV, they don't know why the gap is there, right? Yeah. And you could have a very good reason for having a gap in your profile. You could have been made redundant, for example. That's no fault of your own. And if there is a gap and it's not, the recruiter can't see that, they might just move on to the next candidate. And then unfortunately, you don't qualify for that interview process. Yeah. Really important that when you have that conversation as well with your recruiter at the beginning, is to explain those gaps and, be upfront about it. Then you won't have to describe that then to the in the interview itself, when you meet the possible hiring manager or the peer or any of the leadership team or whoever you're interviewing with. So try and cover that with your recruiter at the beginning.
And do you feel that if it is a case, because, obviously with the ADHD and the anxiety and any mental health issues or neurodivergence, do you feel that's something that people can be upfront about? Like, for instance, one of the jobs I applied for, I did have a major gap in my employment. And luckily when I applied, I still got the job, but I basically said, I have ADHD and I didn't really want to work for a while because it wasn't working for me. But now I'm really passionate about this job. And, I'm ready to start again. And they seem to take that okay. But do you think that's something that you should be honest about or kind of try and cover it up?
Yeah, another great question, Lauren. And another question I get from my clients as well who've been diagnosed with ADHD. I think it's a personal choice to share that with your interviewer. I suppose when to share it is also a question that should be answered. So, my advice would be if you are to share it, and that's your personal choice, as I said, maybe, do it after you've been offered the role.
Yeah.
And I think actually a lot of hiring managers would be appreciative of you doing that. I think, and not every hiring manager is going to be, they will appreciate it, but then maybe they might see that as a red flag, unfortunately, right?
Of course, yeah. Because they want you to be consistent, don't they, within the company?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's also a stigma attached to it as well, right? And unfortunately, we can't get away from that. And that's something, that I'm trying to work on myself, is trying to raise awareness over there being so many good candidates out there that have been diagnosed with ADHD, right? And have anxiety, but are brilliant candidates.
Yeah.
So I think, it is, as I said, it's a personal choice. I also think as well that if you do divulge, your ADHD diagnosis, and the company turns around and says no to you, I would feel you've dodged a bullet there. Because do you actually want to work for someone who has just said no to a candidate that has been diagnosed with ADHD?
Exactly. If that's the first thing and the only thing they see, that's
absolutely
a really difficult person to work with. It's kind of, do you think, a red flag for a lot of other accommodations that they wouldn't put in place for their workers?
Absolutely. And I think this comes down to, companies these days go on about their diversity and inclusion, right? And someone saying, rejecting a candidate, maybe they won't verbalize and tell you that that's the reason. And I doubt they would, because that wouldn't be very inclusive. But these days, companies need to be diverse and inclusive. And I think, taking on someone with ADHD demonstrates the company's commitment to diversity and inclusivity. It looks like a more accepting workplace culture. They've made the decision that they're taking on someone that can think outside the box, right, and use those ADHD superpowers that they have,
I was going to say, is there anything in particular that you see with people that you work with ADHD that you think that employers should know about, that you find really interesting, or kind of, a common theme that you would find that people with ADHD are really good at?
Absolutely, yeah. So, creativity would be top of the list for me. And actually, my advice to anyone out there who's looking to be an entrepreneur, I've used my creativity the last 8 months every day of working at UrHired.ie. So that creativity is something that would be at the forefront. If you're looking for someone that is able to focus, some people that have been diagnosed with ADHD are hyper focused. They can be adaptable. They can have good problem solving skills. They can be innovative. And they can be resilient as well. And have things like an energetic presence in the business as well, and in the team. So, and not, they could be that diverse person within the team. Like when I my advice to hiring managers throughout my career was to make sure that you don't hire the same person 10 times if you've got 10 people on your team, because that's not, you need sort of different skill sets to complement each other to create, a working team, right? So with all those aspects there that I just mentioned, the employer would be lucky to have those attributes in any employee. They will be the qualities that I would look for.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fantastic. I do completely agree. And I feel like people just really see it as a disability or a difference that they don't want in the workplace. But once they actually hire people and then later discover they have ADHD, oftentimes they'd be some of the best employees. Because like you said, it's all about creating kind of a group of people that have just enough contrasting ideas that they can think outside the box, isn't it? If you do have all the same type of person, there won't be any new ideas, there won't be any crack in the workplace, and there won't be any, developments like that. It's really nice to hear that you see that in people that you're working with. Because you specifically do work with people with ADHD and anxiety, and not a lot of people do that. Have a specific interest in those kind of things. And I think it's really important, and that makes you stand out in a way. But also it's nice to hear that that has been your experience.
Absolutely. And Lauren, you just made a really good point there as well. I think if you're thinking about divulging, your ADHD diagnosis, I've spoken to, multiple clients who have asked me this question. And, as I said, it is a personal choice. But also, if you don't divulge it, your employer is probably going to find out about it anyway. So, I suppose a few of my clients have gone into situations where they haven't divulged it in the interview process, and then 6 months into the role, it's become apparent, right? Unfortunately for some of those people, they lost their jobs for different reasons. But I would just kind of take that into account, that what you don't want to do actually for your career as well is to get into a role and then, leave after 6 months and not free to continue throughout your career, because unfortunately then your CV starts to look jumpy. So maybe consider that in the interview process. But as I said, totally anyone's personal choice.
I was going to say, in relation to what you said there, people with ADHD often need different accommodations or different work styles. So do you think that's something that kind of makes divulging sometimes, for some people who choose it personally, your ADHD diagnosis to be beneficial? Because if you start in a role and you commit to everything that maybe overcommit to things that you aren't actually capable of or you're not going to be able to sustain, do you think it's better then to be upfront about it and say, I can actually be great for the role, but I need slight changes?
Absolutely. And I think it shows your honesty as well. Like, and you're also showing that you're showing your authentic self, right? And that is my advice to anyone who is looking for a job, like absolutely anyone, is to be your authentic self in interview. Because if you aren't, and you get the job, that will be found out 3-6 months into the role. And maybe that won't be the right culture for you, or it won't be the right manager to report to, because you said something in your interview maybe that wasn't actually showing your authentic self. And if you're showing your authentic self and it's a no, well, then you've dodged a bullet as well, right? So that business isn't for you. And I would advise anyone looking to interview for any company is to do some research on the culture of the business. Meet someone who's actually in the company, ask them what it's like to work there, have they any concerns, what challenges they have. And you'll find out more from that meeting than you will from any interview you do. And when you ask someone's advice like that, and network with people like that, you can use that information in your interview as well. And if you find out that maybe it's not the right culture for you, then step back from the interview process and look elsewhere. It's all about sort of that preparation piece is so important these days.
Is there any kind of a sneaky question, but is there any red flags in companies that you may have seen for people with ADHD who apply, get a job, and then end up coming back to you because they've left the job or they got fired? Is there anything that you've seen that people with ADHD or even anxiety or other issues should look out for, that company might not be the right thing for them?
Yeah. So I think you need to research if they, if the company have anything in place in regards to employing someone with ADHD, whether they have, quiet places to work, do they have hybrid working, anything that can support you, with your ADHD symptoms. If they don't accommodate for those things like that, you're probably going to get yourself into a situation where you're going to leave that company. So finding that out in the interview process is really important. And I think it's back to my point about networking and trying to find this information out. If you find a company like that, that's somewhere where, you could flourish, right? And build a career. So I would do as much research as possible before interviewing. And if you're not finding what the information that you want to find out about those accommodations, then I would probably look elsewhere.
Okay. That's absolutely fantastic. Is there any kind of review websites or anything that you would recommend to kind of find out about the culture? Or do you really think it's about meeting up with other people who work there?
I think it's the latter, Lauren. Yeah, I think networking with anyone. I think you can look these days. You can look online and you can go on review websites as well. And I think that's important. But actually meeting someone in the business, you're going to find out more in that meeting than any other interview, as I said. That can be challenging in itself, right? It's nerve-wracking to do. I find it nerve-wracking to reach out to someone I don't know, set up a meeting and meet them for coffee. Even though I do it, I still find it nerve-wracking. But actually, if you take the attitude that the person actually wants to help, and if you ask for someone's advice, they usually give it. So, try to be as upfront as you can and just say, look, all I want to do is kind of find out what it's like to work here. But networking is the most impactful way that I've ever found a job. All the companies I worked at, I used this technique to find out a bit more about the company, find out about the culture from actual people that were doing my job that I was going in to do. And actually, I shared that with my interviewers as well. So I actually said in the interview that, well, look, I actually had a conversation with one of the recruiters in the business just to find out a bit more about the culture and what it's like to work there. And they thought that was brilliant, because it was me being proactive, actually networking with someone in the business, which other candidates don't do. It's something that is a key part of the interview process, but I would say 80-90% of candidates don't do that. But as I said, if it's not for you as well, don't do it. If you find it too nerve-wracking and you don't feel comfortable doing it, I wouldn't recommend it. But I found it extremely effective.
I was going to say on that, like, I know you said it can be nerve-wracking and definitely, and it's not for everyone, but it does sound like an excellent opportunity to make sure that later your confidence isn't knocked. Because if you're getting a more comprehensive view of what the workplace is like from other people through networking, you're less likely to go into a company, then get your confidence knocked by either losing your job or not excelling in that company or being treated badly. There's workplace bullying and everything. So that is actually fantastic. You also mentioned nerves there. So I would like to know, obviously you're working directly with people with ADHD, anxiety and other mental health conditions or neurodiverse conditions. Is there anything that you would do in particular to help them calm their nerves? Because it's definitely an anxiety provoking process.
Absolutely. And, I actually think nerves are a good thing, Lauren. And if you can spin it like that in your head, that will help. In my whole career, I had never had feedback from a hiring manager to say that, Lauren didn't get the because of nerves. So try and keep that front of mind when you're interviewing. I would say to help with the nerves, I still do these techniques today. So breathing exercises before the interview.
Yeah.
If you're doing a virtual interview, breathing in for 5, 8 for 10 takes down your heart rate and will level your voice as well.
Okay.
I advise people to do that in before virtual interviews. Probably not if you're in a reception area and you start doing breathing exercises. It might look a bit odd.
They might see it.
I would also say that mock interviews really help. So if you can get an interview coach or even a friend to do a mock interview with you, the day before, the day of the interview, that really, really helps because you'll have done essentially an interview quite close to your actual interview. Mindfulness techniques as well. Like, you've got all these apps on your phone that you can use, especially the day of your interview, to be in the right mindset. Go out for a walk. That really helps. And I would say as well, to take care of nerves. So there's a really good podcast. I listened to Steve Bartlett, who's a serial entrepreneur. He was on Dragon's Den. And there was a lady called Amy Cuddy on his podcast, and she's a body language expert. And she mentioned that when you meet someone for the first time, the person that you've met has already made up 50% of their mind on you by how you carry yourself, to how you interact with them for the first few seconds. So I would say that when you are in an interview situation, 50% of the handshake and the eye contact and how you carry yourself when you meet that person, they've already made 50% of their mind up about you. So I would spin that for nerves, in that if you have a good interaction at the start of an interview and you shake their hand, you make eye contact, 50% of your interview is over. So you can relax a bit. All you have to do now is say the right thing and you've got the job.
Absolutely.
So try and think about that when you interview. And I would also say that practice that introduction as well. Do it with a friend, do it with a family member, whatever it is. And look up techniques on handshakes and how important eye contact is as well. So that helped me with my nerves anyway. I'm halfway through by the time I've sat on the seat.
That's absolutely fantastic. Do you think that a little bit of nerves makes a potential employee slightly more attractive? Do you feel that it shows a bit of genuine authenticity? Or do you think it should be straight up no emotion in the first few minutes?
100%. Like, I think if you're nervous, as I said, I think it's a good thing. It shows that you want the job, right?
Yeah.
And when I say that to my clients, they relax a little bit. So, try to use those breathing exercises. Nerves usually disappear. For me personally, nerves disappear for me about 2 or 3 minutes into an interview. Once I've shaken their hand, once I've met them, then I can kind of sit down and relax. I think building rapport with your interviewer is really important. And if you build rapport from the beginning of an interview, you automatically feel more relaxed and the nerves will disappear. I would also say as well that, if you are nervous and you're asked a question, don't blurt out the first thing that comes into your head, because the nerves can take over and you think you're not listening to the question properly. So my advice would be is to ask the person to repeat the question if you don't know the answer yet. Use silence, take a sip of water just to calm down, think of your answer and then answer. Don't kind of blurt out the first thing that comes into your head, because unfortunately usually that won't be the right answer. So try and use that technique. It really works.
That's fantastic as well for public speaking, I think, because oftentimes we do try to fill the silences, don't we? I actually do feel like that's really, really specific to people with ADHD as well, or anxiety, because the silence makes you feel that you're not performing well enough. So how do you feel that you kind of help people get used to coping with silences? When you're helping them out with the job preparation, do you notice that as they're talking to you that they're kind of getting more comfortable with it while they think?
Yeah, as I said, I think you need to use those techniques around silence. You can use a couple of seconds after you've been answered a question. Um, I suppose sometimes it can. I suppose when you're in an interview situation, you know it's usually not going to go to your plan. So, anyone with ADHD that I've discussed the interview process with is, you know, they say to me, what I do on is I plan out the interview, and I know I'm going to be asked these questions, and then when I'm in the interview situation itself, it doesn't go to plan at all. And unfortunately, that's the way interviews go. So you have to use those techniques then to make sure you do answer the questions in the right way, and really listen to your interview as well. I think nerves can get in the way of actually listening to someone when they're asking a question. You did a really good podcast on imposter syndrome as well, and that has a huge effect on your interview process also. So I think before an interview as well, just, you know, you think to yourself, you have actually been called for interview because you have the right experience. So you have every right to be there versus any other candidate. So all you really need to do is get in and actually verbalize that to someone that you've never met before. So I think interviews are actually a lot more simple than everyone goes on that they are. So, you know, go in there with confidence. As I said, you know, the company want to employ someone. They don't want to waste an hour and have this person as a no. They want to actually hire you. And that's the attitude they go in with from the beginning of the interview. It's just making sure that you, you know, communicate the right information that they want to hear and you answer the right questions. So try and take a breath, and, you know, that imposter syndrome can head, especially when you're nervous. So, you know, go in there with your chest out, and because you should, you know, you're there because they want to employ you.
Great. No, yeah, absolutely. Because that's definitely something that gets to the nerves of everyone, where you're thinking they could have 5 other people today to interview. Why would they pick me? But you're right. They wouldn't have called if there was no point in calling you. They wouldn't have just tried to fill the position. So that's fantastic advice. On that as well, is there any technique that you feel people should use when they, you know, when they throw curveball questions at you and you oftentimes don't know the answer? I was told that it's okay to say you don't know, but you're eager to learn. Do you feel that way, or do you think you should bluff it?
I think you're right, Lauren. I would say I don't know, right? But I'm eager to learn. You know, and however you want, if you want to phrase it like that or use a different phrase, I think that you're being honest. I would definitely not advise being, you know, fluffing it. I would say that is not being your authentic self. An interviewer will know when you're doing that. If you're not telling the truth in an interview, they will know. You know, and the feedback that I got from hiring managers when when someone was maybe not telling the full truth in an interview is that they liked the candidate, but there was something wasn't right. And actually, they aren't even aware of what's not right. But what wasn't right was that actually the candidate wasn't telling the truth in the interview. So you're right. I think just say you don't know, but you're happy to learn. You could try and think of something maybe in your personal life that is similar to what they're asking. At least you've given some sort of answer, and it's the truth as well. But only do that if you're confident enough to do it. So try and be honest with them, and it'll definitely play in your favor.
Yeah, because I think that's something that will come into play with the imposter syndrome and the rejection sensitivity that comes with these issues is you want to fill the silences, you want to come across as the best version of yourself. So it is about that learning to sit with the anxiety and be honest, isn't it? Just accepting that you're not going to know everything they ask.
Absolutely, it is. And I've been in interview situations myself where I've said that as well, and I've still secured the job.
Yeah. Okay.
It's shown the honesty, right?
Yeah.
And every candidate, is not going to tick every box for a role. It's very rare that feedback that I got from all the hiring managers that I dealt with over my career that, the hiring manager will come back and say that person was absolutely excellent. They ticked absolutely every box. Usually it's this person is brilliant. There's some stuff they probably need to work on and they'll need to learn when they come in. But actually, companies look at that as being a positive because the candidate sometimes, if they have a lot of experience, they have bad habits as well that they can bring into the business. So sometimes it's actually better to come in and not have experience in certain aspects of the role so that can be thought the company's way. So try and think about that in an interview also. It's not about ticking absolutely every box.
Okay, fantastic. I feel like it's kind of when you go for your driving lessons and you
Yeah.
shouldn't have drove around the estate before because you're going to learn from scratch then, and make sure that you're kind of doing all the right things. That's fantastic, Owen. Thank you so much. Just one more question. Is there any bit of common advice that you would give to all your listeners about starting with you or starting with any, starting with the job interview process in general?
Absolutely, yeah. I think preparation is key, right? And your confidence is really important in interview. Not to be overly confident, but the more preparation you do, the better your interview process is going to be, and the more results you're going to get. And I would say, I think it's back to the beginning of our conversation, Lauren, is to make sure you're getting that constructive feedback from any company that you have taken the time to interview with as well. But also be thinking when you are interviewing, are there any red flags here for me as a candidate coming in? And at the end of the process, when you have your offer, which will be great, write all the positives and negatives down throughout the process. Like, what were the good things, but what are the things that you're concerned with? And if there are any concerns, to raise that then as well with your recruiter or whoever you're dealing with. So you have peace of mind then with the answer that you get, whether you accept that role or not. And just because you have an offer doesn't mean that you should accept the role. Throughout that list, break it all down and then make a decision on it. Take your time. Don't accept a job really quickly. There's always time, and companies expect that. They don't expect you to just accept the role straight away. And be conscious of that imposter syndrome as well. You're called there because you're called for interview because you have the experience. So just go in and try and deliver it as best you can, and all you can do is your best. If that's not good enough, then you just move on to the next company, the next role, and learn from that experience.
I think that's fantastic advice because for neurodivergent people or people with low self-esteem or low confidence, low or high anxiety, it's oftentimes that they feel that the company is doing them a favor by hiring them. And it should be equal. Like, it's great that you're saying that you should be looking at what you think the company is going to value in you and what you think you value in the company. That was one of the mistakes I made for so long. As soon as someone would want me to work there, I would just accept it and ignore all the red flags. So it's definitely about building that confidence, isn't it? And realizing your worth.
And actually, I did a video not so long ago on interviews are a two-way street on my social media platforms. And it's all about, making sure that the company was sold to you as a candidate coming in. Like, what did they say was good about working there? Why should I join this business? So it's the interview process is there for you to sell yourself to the company, but also the company need to sell themselves to you. You're a really good candidate. You've got the skills that they want. It's equally important for them to sell to you as it is for you to them. So keep that front of mind when you're making your decision.
Absolutely. So it sounds realistically like confidence is the main thing here. And I feel like it's fantastic that that's what you work directly with. Most things that you're discussing is about building the confidence and learning your worth and learning your strengths and what you can offer to the company. So that's absolutely fantastic. Is there anything else that we didn't cover before we finish up, but that I want to hear also? I know you're starting a podcast, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the podcast is be released in the new year. So it's called the Interview Expert. So it'll be a mix of me interview experts from different multinational companies.
Wow.
And also me, talking through things like the STAR method, interview techniques, how to create an impactful presentation. There'll be different topics that I'll discuss on the podcast. So it'll be used, and the listeners hopefully will benefit from it. And when they are going through an interview process, it'll be of benefit to them. With the advice and the content of the podcast. So you're really looking forward to it. Hopefully, I'm as good as an interviewer as you, Lauren. I will, it'll be available in the new year. So if anyone wants to link in with me, please do within your listeners. And I'm more than happy to speak to anyone as well for advice on their interview process.
That's amazing. Very kind of you. You sound like absolutely wonderful what you do. It's really nice that you come from it with a place of empathy. And I really do think that'll stand to you in the podcast. Do you know where it's going to be released yet? Would it be Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud?
Yeah, it'll be on the usual platforms. So it'll be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. So if you want to get a link to it, it'll be on my social media channels as well. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to helping my audience as well.
That's fantastic, Owen. Thank you so much. I really appreciated having you on today. I think you've shared a lot of valuable insights with the listeners, and I'm sure they'll be really, really happy to learn all the little tips that you gave them. So that is Owen of UrHired.ie. So you can find him on that website. Podcast link is on there as well, as you said, Owen. So that's great. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Lauren.
Listening to Let's Chat, ADHD Ireland's first podcast hosted by me, Lauren McBride. You can find us on Instagram at ADHD Ireland, and I'm on there too, at Her Thoughts in Bright Colours. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'd love to hear your feedback and opinions on the topics covered each week. Sending positive vibes until we chat again.